Before we start, I just need to send you something incredibly unhinged. Hold on.
Oh boy.
I'm just like, why? What was the reason?
I'm
Some-
I'm concerned.
It's just like, why?
What the fuck?
Like, explain. This is an abuse of Photoshop. I'm sure it abuses the terms and conditions.
Stove Buscemi. It's unnecessary.
It's unnecessary.
There's no need for this. Oh my god. Why does this exist?
I don't know. And there's no context or anything. Like, just, it's a stove.
This is
Hate it.
this is the future that Elon wants on Twitter. And welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC, a proud member of the Beautiful Game Network and brought to you by Roughneck Scarves and Icarus FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke, and tonight I am joined by my co-host, Mika Burrell. Mika, how's it going?
Hey, Phil. It's going, man. It's been kind of like we've been talking about before we started recording. It's been kind of a meh week. Kind of a meh result at the weekend, so yeah. I guess that follows, that tracks.
I'm trying to get my energy up, but it's one of those things where, they always talk about atmospheres in soccer. I feel like it's the same deal with energy on podcasts, where it's you got to give me something to get excited about. It's a give and take. I can't just manufacture this, week in and week out.
Well, I mean, on the flip side, your boys have one foot in the Champions League final.
That's probably sustaining me a bit, to be honest. It was a nice little result against Villarreal. I think I feel good about the fact that Villarreal have to come out and play in Spain. I think that's a perfect situation for Liverpool. So, yeah. No, it was a nice, tidy result today, and meanwhile, on the other side of the bracket, it's pure chaos going into a second leg in the Bernabeu. So, kind of a best case scenario.
Truly, and I feel like I have to shamelessly plug our sister podcast, Hardcore Football, because anyone who likes the European game or the wider world game, go check that out. Because Phil totally cursed the Real Madrid City tie by saying it was going to be cagey, and it was anything but.
Yeah.
So you got to love it. I also said that Lukaku would be, Premier League top goal scorer, and that is totally not coming to pass. So just listen to our terrible takes over there as well.
Yeah, you could find us at HXC Football and on any podcast platform, which... For this podcast, if you're finding us for the first time, if you want more locomotive stuff, same deal. You can find us on any major podcast platform. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, which we appreciate every single person that has, I know that it's been a lot more maybe therapeutic than anything else. Hopefully. As you've been listening this season. But if you've enjoyed it, please consider leaving us a rating or review if the platform allows. Spotify recently started doing that in addition to Apple Podcasts. So, and you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, all of the above. Which, with an away match coming up this weekend, we will likely have a watch along on our Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. So live watch along of the away matches, and you can avoid dodgy away commentary for other USL clubs, and especially an MLS2 side. Sometimes the production is not given the attention maybe it deserves. So anyways, you can check us out on any of those, and check out our Patreon. We write some stuff over there, and if you're so inclined, consider supporting us. But I guess with all of that being said, I think that is everything in the way of admin. The Seriously Loco match review. Mika, we had the first draw of El Paso Locomotive season come to pass. 1-1 against Oakland Roots in El Paso. Think it's fair to say that this match, Locomotive again probably deserved a little bit better, which is becoming a little bit of a theme this season of results not matching the performance writ large. But what did you make of Locomotive? And I mean, this kind of has to be classified as 2 dropped when you draw at home to a side like Roots.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is 2 points dropped rather than 1 point earned. I mean, yes, technically we earned 1 point, but I think we really should have gone for all 3. It should have really won the game comfortably, and we would have done if not for some really crucial missed chances. So yeah, it's disappointing in that regard. Obviously, when you're trying to stop the slide, as it were, or the kind of rockiness of the fixtures so far, a draw can do you well, I suppose. But at home to Oakland Roots, like, really we should be expecting and earning more, I think.
Yeah, this one is rough because they're just, like you said, it's just not a match that, and I think we've talked about this with different results. I think ahead of the Monterey Bay match, but sort of ahead of this one too. I think it's just like, it's one of those at home to Roots. Like, if you want to be a playoff team, these are the sort of matches that you win. Like, and we always talk about, win your home games and the rest takes care of itself, I guess. But they, unable to assert themselves in this one. And to start, I guess, like before we get in onto the moments that ended up defining this match, we obviously saw some enforced changes. Although the back 5, if you will, the 4 across the back line and Evan Newton stayed largely the same. And what we've come to expect, I guess, from John Hutchinson and company, but the midfield and attack did look a little bit different. And most notably, I think we saw Eric Calvillo in a number 8 position. Ironically enough, he hasn't really played in the 8 despite wearing the number 8. And then Lucho Solignac we saw back in the lineup after his departure for family reasons. So with those injections back in the lineup, how did you feel, I guess, about how this lineup acquitted themselves?
I mean, I thought it was pretty decent overall. Calvillo, I think it was, I mean, he's been waiting for his chance, and actually John Hutchinson said as much in the coach's show tonight about how he's one of those players that he singled out as someone who's, there's just people in front of him right now playing, and I think he got his chance because Diego Luna was obviously suspended after that second yellow against San Antonio. So I thought Eric was fine. I think he just needs to. It's hard because it's like he definitely looks like a player that needs to play himself into some form, but just the minutes are at a premium right now for him in and around that 8 spot or 10 or however you want to think about it. Lucho being back, I think that was exciting for everyone, really. I mean, that is our marquee number 9, if you will, and I like that John was able to retain Josue Aaron Gomez in the side, because I don't think that Josue had done anything necessarily to be dropped. Still scoring goals, and I think he's taking the most shots on average for the side, which is something that obviously is good and something we'd like to continue. So, yeah, I think overall the selection was fine, and it should have been enough to beat Oakland at home.
Yeah, this is it's tough because I do think the performance, and it's going to sound, rote and cliche of what we've been talking about this whole season so far, but what we've seen in terms of the performance, eye test and underlying numbers all suggest like that this is good, and the performances are good, and the results just aren't there. And in this one, it really started on a really odd sort of foot. Locomotive maybe didn't come out of the blocks that well in the opening 15, and Oakland make them pay for what was a pretty slow start by seizing a half chance on a accidentally, I guess, flicked header at the near post from Lucho Solignac, just lands at Formea's feet.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with conceding a foul in a dangerous area. I mean, not necessarily right on the edge of the box or anything, but with a team like Oakland, they're coming on the road. Those are the kind of opportunities that they will try to capitalize on. They're not going to want to play like super expansive necessarily on someone else's pitch, and especially Oakland, because let's face it, they're not one of the more stacked sides in the league, and they'll want to capitalize on some of those dead ball situations, and they did do. Now, is some of that our own doing? For sure. Lucho Solignac, as you said, he's defending the near post when the in-swinger comes in. He gets decent touch on it with the head, but he flicks it right back into danger. And is it a mistake? Probably. I understand why he's defending the near post. His height and his awareness in that area, it makes a lot of sense. But he did just come back into the side, and hindsight being 2020, I wonder if that's like kind of I don't know, like maybe tactically like a bigger job for him than maybe you would like for someone who has been out for so long. But at the end of the day, he's a professional footballer, and he should know to clear that out. Or I would probably have even taken a corner kick if he cleared it past the goal line instead of right back into the 6-yard box, where Evan Newton was absolutely not going to be getting to that. And in Lucho's defense, I don't remember anyone tracking Dariusz Famela's run. And he latches onto it at the far post, and it's a great finish. I mean, nothing Evan Newton can do about that. And again, shooting ourselves in the foot there, and paying for, like what you mentioned, a slow start with conceding the foul in that area.
Yeah, it is. I mean, kind of exactly what in terms of defending set pieces and all those things. Really, I would say even cutting out that cross, like if you're going to get on the end of it, it can't go towards the middle of the goal. Like that's kind of, just the key. Like if anything, it just needs to go back out. Even if they get kind of a subsequent cross, it gives us just a chance to set up it. Maybe get, maybe there's a few runners in offside positions now who kind of have to like check back. And so there's a lot of, it just gives a lot of options. Like if you don't flick it on, because Formella, to his credit, like really gambles and is pretty optimistic that like, hey, something might come to me. Because in no way is he like, the way that ball's delivered in, there really was no way he could have predicted that like the ball's going to go into the area that he actually ran into. So gets a slice of luck, but he did dare at the back post. And yeah, the finish is really good and controlled for running onto a a volley like that and being able to control the finish and keep it under the bar. And yeah, just not, I think we've seen at times like the Locomotive defense get caught a little flat-footed, and I think it was a case of that where, hey, like we kind of defend, we get on the end of the initial ball in, but we then don't defend kind of the subsequent ball. So yeah, I think there's a couple of mistakes there, and yeah, in the end, it's a really bad goal to concede, and something that like we were talking about, and I think we've been talking about kind of like not on the podcast necessarily because it hasn't really been a factor, but I think our set piece defending so far this year up until this point has been quite good, and in this one, Oakland actually have like a pretty quick chance after this goal where I think it was a combination of like. I think it was a combination of Brockbank and a Roots attacker, like nearly kind of like combined for a weird own goal / and it kind of trickles past the post, luckily. But yeah, there were a couple of times that we got caught a little bit out on set pieces, which has felt comfortable, I would say, like for the most part coming into this match.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen every week where your striker heads the ball back into a dangerous area. I mean, I'm sure they'll revisit that because, again, Lucho hadn't played for a handful of matches before then, and I don't necessarily know if that would be his remit going forward. Like I said, makes sense given his build and his abilities in the air, but maybe a rethink is on the cards if that happens again. Like you said, though, I think the set piece defending has been overall pretty good. It's kind of like a mixture of like zonal and man-to-man. I think we're definitely like zonal marking around the 6-yard area and then just picking a man further out. But Darius Famela obviously is able to get through that in that moment. But yeah, we just have to be more clever in those areas because the quote lesser teams on paper, that's how they're going to want to capitalize is in those dead ball situations.
Locomotive do find a way back in into the match through Lucho Solignac, and it's a ball over the top. It's actually one of the like simpler goals that Locomotive have scored this year, I would say, because a lot of times we are like passing moves, skill moves, that sort of thing, like really creating space for each other. In this one, Lucho times a run right in between the center backs, and Richie plays a good ball over the top for him. And the chip from Lucho is maybe not the like best finish in terms of like, I'm not sure what would have happened if there's not contact from the defender, but it does go in, kind of trickles over the line. And one of those where maybe you think like Locomotive need more goals like that. Maybe not like always scoring the I don't want to say the perfect goal because that's not always been the case, but maybe being a little bit more direct or a little bit more, I don't know, just taking a chance.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant ball from Richie Ryan, just right up the gut. He has that in his locker when he is, afforded the chance to get a bit forward. And actually, I think he's probably second to only Dylan Mars in those kind of like key passes, chances created type of, probably key passes, not necessarily chances created. I think Emmanuel Sonupe is up there, but yeah, Richie's has respectable numbers in that regard, and it's a really good pass. And Lucho was really complimentary of Richie for it in the post game press conference. Yeah, I mean, it's his reward for getting into the dirty areas. And actually, it's funny because we were up in the press box, myself and a couple of the other journalists, and Derek from the club was saying, yeah, Opta is like going back and forth on whether they're going to give this as a own goal for whoever it deflected off of, and we were all like shooting the messenger a little bit, like, no, it needs to be a Lucho goal, like that's bullshit. But I guess they didn't. I guess they must have felt the vibes Opta did and kept it as crediting it to Lucho. I'm curious though, do you think? because you watched the game back,
Mhm.
do you think that there's any element of like a goalkeeper error here from Diaz? Because to me, it seems like someone at some point unplugs his controller. Like he doesn't know if he looks like he's caught in two minds about closing down the angle or defending his line, and he comes out to close the angle and kind of freezes. I think
Yeah.
it's shoddy goalkeeping, no?
Yeah, well, I think anytime, and I think we've kind of seen this firsthand, and I think to his credit, I think Evan Newton has cut this out of his game to an extent, or him and the back line have kind of figured it out. But when there's that ball in behind, especially for a team that was sitting as deep as Oakland were, there really shouldn't be any confusion about like what the game plan is for that. Because that run in between the center backs is always a threat, like on paper, and it should be just a very easy reaction where it's like, oh yeah, when this ball goes over the top, we're letting the center backs deal with it and I'm staying on my line, or like I'm going to claim it. But it just looked like, yeah, as you said, like it just seems like he doesn't know what he's going to do, which when they're playing that deep, you have like, it shouldn't be that difficult. Like it shouldn't be that complicated, because oftentimes it's because you're playing so high and all this stuff, but there's really only like the 18-yard box is like, that's how much space there was between the back line and the goalkeeper.
Right.
And so, yeah, why he doesn't just come out and claim it is like kind of, I'm not really sure. But even if he does stay on his line, it's probably a pretty straightforward catch. Like, so yeah, as you said, I do think there's a big element there of the goalkeeping, because if he does either, the goal probably doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I want to give big credit to Lucho Solignac, though, in his response from what was just like a freak accident, really, for lending a hand and conceding the opener to Oakland. Is even like 2 minutes after we conceded, he has the ball in the area and turns and shoots, forces a parry save from Diaz, and then a couple minutes after that, he's scoring the goal. So, I mean, that to me is really important. Even though the result wasn't all 3 points, I think the reaction from a player like that, like, again, been out a couple games, maybe a little bit rusty, we need Lucho and players of his ilk responding to the mishaps like that, right, where they're just like right back at it. And so that was encouraging to me, that he responded so well and was able to score a goal and not let it really bother him going forward. And just the mark of a true professional, really, and someone very experienced. And I just hope that can transmit to the rest of the team, of course.
The next moment, and the moment on which I think you called it earlier in the week before we recorded Hardcore Football, you called it the sliding doors moment. But we have this moment on which the result of the match ultimately hinged, which was Josue Aaron Gomez cuts in from the left-hand side, forces Fuenmayor into a pretty clumsy challenge in the area, and he brings Gomez down, earns himself a penalty, and unfortunately Josue places it almost too well, and off the post and out, where he went a little too much for precision, and is a little unlucky on the finish. So I guess first and foremost, the penalty itself, but then I mean, we have this moment where if it goes to 2-1, the way the rest of the match played out, you kind of feel like Oakland wouldn't have found the answer.
Yeah, a real sliding doors moment for sure. I mean, that's the game right there. And I knew that we would rue that miss from Josue, and it's unfortunate because he has scored one before for us this season, penalty.
Yeah.
And the way he earned the penalty, yes, it's I'll agree that Fuenmayor does look clumsy there, but I think Josue is really clever here too, because he absolutely does the fullback on that wide area and cuts in. and looking like a real winger, by the way, like
Yeah.
the way that he came in like that, cutting in into the box. But he does lean into Flamboyard and try to shield the ball and is drawing the contact. And so it was very clever.
Yeah.
And ultimately the contact does lead to the foul. So just it was reminiscent, I think. Maybe not it wasn't as insidious as this, but just reminding me a little bit of like some of the things that like Harry Kane pulls every now and then.
Yeah.
Where like he feels the contact coming, so he's like, all right, well, I'm gonna go down.
Dangle a
Josue,
leg.
yeah, exactly. Josue leans the back into the man, trying to shield the ball, and knows that the contact resulting from that is gonna bring him down, and it's just really clever, really good forward play, and it's just really unfortunate that he's not able to put that one away. And these boys need to be practicing penalties, man, because we've been getting a lot of them with the speed of our play.
Yeah.
And it's the difference between winning and not winning. So, it sounds really trite, but yeah, they've got to be putting those away.
That brings us to 1 for 3 on the season in penalty conversions.
I believe that's right, yeah, because now Josue scored one, Richie missed one, and Josue missed this one, so yeah.
So, yeah, it was one of those moments where you think if that goes differently based on the way the rest of the match played out, and obviously, I think there's probably something to be said of Oakland probably would have gone for it, if they're down a goal, and they probably would have like thrown a little bit more at Locomotive because they were more than happy to leave with a point. I think that much is clear just based on the stats. I think something worth mentioning is the fact that Oakland were extremely limited, like during this match. 6 shots, 3 on target, and that was with a decent chunk of the ball, 40%, which is more than other teams that Locomotive have played this season can claim.
Yeah.
But Locomotive did have a big edge in terms of shots and chances created, and I think you would argue with that early Lucho chance, there is also a fairly late Lucho chance. Seb Velasquez shoots from distance. It was about the 73rd minute, I believe, or 76, somewhere in there. But anyways, Velasquez shoots from distance, forces a save, and it's parried directly into the path of Lucho, who's running in. And maybe just a case of like he's almost too close to the goalkeeper where he just kind of strikes it right against him and can't really find a way around or over him.
Yeah. It was just unfortunate for Lucho in that moment. I think you're right that the angle was so acute that he couldn't really take a touch to place it necessarily. So yeah, that was just one of many late chances, kind of bobbling around in the box for a bit in some of those late phases. I mean, Seb as well, like Seb Velasquez, we have to point out, he had, I think, a gilt edge chance very late on, and he did not want to take it on his weaker foot, so he checked back onto his left, and the angle was gone, and then he pretty much shot it right back into traffic. So just a couple of miscues from the attack, and then also like Dylan Mahrez, I thought, and I feel harsh even calling Dylan out because, and I mean, not calling him out, but just even mentioning him because I thought he had another really solid game. But for his standards, I felt that he was playing like through balls like half second too late, or kind of not deciding what he wanted to do once he got to the edge of the area. And it was just a little bit disjointed in that way. And we didn't have a Diego Luna to pull something out of nowhere, you know what I mean, and beat a couple people on the dribble and then, rifle it home. So, when we're missing players like that, we have to find a way, and unfortunately we just didn't.
Yeah, according to the stats coming out of this one, Locomotive registered 4 big chances and missed 3 of them. So, yeah, not going to come away with many wins with conversion rates like that, unfortunately. It's tough because oftentimes creation of those chances is the most important thing. Like, because that's the tough part. And then, the finishing is more like timing and luck and a little bit of just that like class on the end of a move where it can't be coached necessarily. But that's almost the more troubling part, is like it continues to be the story that Locomotive create the better chances, have these like big, they've won the XG in every game that they've played this season, except for the Fuego match, I think. But aside from that, like, they're not getting the win. So these sorts of moments are really big. And I guess like the concern is the confidence of those guys, because if they're constantly overthinking those moments because they're missing these chances, it's this sort of vicious cycle that starts.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I and I'm sure others worry about with Josue Aaron Gomez, is we know that he's a confidence player. So what does this miss do, right? Because, besides that, I thought he played very well. I thought he's been pretty good for us. And again, hasn't really warranted being dropped, even with, the likes of Diego Luna and Lucho on our side. But, I just hope that this doesn't lead to any kind of backslide in terms of confidence for him or any of the guys, because at the end of the day, it is not a loss, right? Like, there are points on the board from this one. We should have won, should have gotten all 3 points. I definitely think that, but this is one of those that the penalty for sure, maybe not even the result, but at least just the penalty misses. I'm hoping it's something that he just kind of puts in a box, right, and buries, because no sense dwelling on it. And look no further than Lucho Solignac. He didn't dwell on the mistake, right? I mean, he scored the goal for us. Probably should have had 2 at least, but it's just one of those things that we need to just kind of put away once the video is done and it's talked about in training on the Monday. That's it. We keep going.
The big storylines out of this one, unfortunately, as has been the case throughout this early season for Locomotive, are about the players that suffered injuries during the match. And the first to come off the field injured, and what is looking like the most serious of the injuries based on some of the comments out of the club, Emmanuel Sonupe comes off with an apparent groin injury, some sort of muscle injury in his lower body. When it was assessed that this is going to be a few weeks or 2 to 4 weeks or somewhere in this, 4 to 5 weeks, depending on who you talk to, with a player that's been as influential as Manny has on so much of the good that has happened in what has been a tough start, him missing out for that amount of time feels like a big blow.
Yeah, it's gutting, because he's one of those players that gets you out of your seat. Him and Luna on either side of that strike or that attack, that forward line is really exciting, and it just is. I'm gutted for Manning, because I know that he feels that he's in a good moment just as much as we think that he is as well. So, his numbers are great. I think we'd want a little bit more actual goal contribution from him, but as far as chances created, the sprints, the expected threat, if you will, of Emmanuel Sonupe it's been off the charts. Like, he's been excellent.
Yeah.
So it was gutting to see him come off, just before that half-hour mark, and looking very uncomfortable. I think Joe Rodriguez from the Striker was reporting that he had gone or is going for an MRI. We spoke with Manny, and he's hoping that it's just a couple weeks, but I know Hutch said, he wants to be back in 2 weeks, but it's looking more like a month at least. Yeah. That he'll have to sit it out, and obviously the priority is for him to be healthy, but it is a blow to the team because he's not the only one, right? He's just the latest one. And it's really unfortunate because he has, I think, started his career at Locomotive very, very well.
The story at the end of this one is Seb Velasquez. He comes off injured, and then this just adds to, this was his first game back from a lengthy injury. Now he's out for at least a week, maybe 2 weeks. And that's barring any aggravation of the injury, before before that point. So it's been just a plagued season for Seb Velasquez so far.
Yeah, very unfortunate. I think it's a hamstring. So, I mean, not an injury he's not accustomed to having, unfortunately, and Seb isn't, necessarily a spring chicken. He is 31 years old about there. And yeah, it's just really unfortunate, especially like you said, having just come back. Doing the hamstring again is tough, physically, but also emotionally, because he was very excited to be making his return to the pitch. He said as much on Twitter. He's a gregarious guy, very popular in the locker room, and of course you want a guy like that out on the pitch, inspiring his teammates. This has knock-on effects because he's one of the senior players in the squad, and someone that can play in both like that advanced midfield as well as those forward areas. And so that's just one less person for depth. And we've got Diego Luna, who is a teenager, and we're going to be having to put tons of minutes into his legs, which we probably already would have done anyway, but now it's kind of like our hand is forced. Yeah. So that, the knock-on effects of all these injuries is not anything to overlook, I think.
Yeah. The availability, especially when you have in USL, I would say more broadly, like we actually, I mean, we don't have one of the smallest squads in the league, but we have still a small squad by like the global standards of
right.
what people typically carry. And so when you have really basically, 22, you have 2 players for each position. That's essentially like how we line up. Can start to look extremely thin really quickly when you've got multiple guys out with injuries. And there really hasn't been a point yet this season. I mean, it's feeling an awful lot, to be honest, like season 1 in terms of the amount of like lack of availability. And until we can have all of these pieces available at any given time, it feels tough to get any sort of momentum going when, especially with a guy, as you said, like Vela, who's been like in and out of the team, and all this stuff. So anyways, I think Seb, obviously we wish him the best and want him back as soon as he's able to return. And that goes for anybody in the squad. But yeah, it's just been, I'm sure it's been frustrating for them, but it definitely, I don't know. I think it leads to us feeling this like lack of consistency among the team, and there's just a lack of consistency in like the availability. One such player that's also had like a really stop-start beginning to the season is Martin Payares, who again suffers an injury, is a little bit he's out for again maybe a week, maybe 2. Hasn't been present in terms of like starting in the side recently over this last stretch of games, but again, just not having the option is really like the issue, and him not being able to build some confidence as well.
Yeah, exactly. This was put to us as a training injury.
Yeah.
Which is just so frustrating, right? Because that should be the place where you're just learning and building momentum and stuff, and to be injured on the training pitch is just such a blow. And I know for John Hutchinson, it's just unbelievable, because I think he's had 22 players on the training pitch, maybe like twice this entire season.
Yeah.
Including right before Oakland, and now that's not going to be the case yet again. So just imagine how frustrating it is for the coaching staff who and Hutch has harped on the fact that he wants competition in the squad. Well, how can there be competition if a lot of your changes are forced, right? So, I think competition raises the level of all the players. And if you know that your spot is secure because the other choice is injured, well, I mean, I think naturally maybe performance levels might drop. And that's not to accuse any of these players of being unprofessional or anything. I just think it's human nature, right? Like you might you might not make that last sprint. You might not, track that one runner because, it's subconscious, I think.
Yeah.
And I think the coaching staff know that too because they harp on wanting that competition. So it's unfortunate in a lot of different ways. Obviously, the first being we just don't want these guys injured. Like we want them to be healthy, but then all the knock-on effects, as I say.
Well, where this result leaves Locomotive is in 12th, still at just above Monterey Bay at the bottom of USL's Western Conference. I was looking at, and it's one of those things where when you take each game kind of in its own, but on its own merit or whatever, it can be interesting to look at the season stats and just the sheer fact that Locomotive have scored 14 goals this season through 7 games, which is better than Colorado Springs. Second only, I mean, they've only scored less goals than San Diego and Phoenix. Those are the only 2 teams that have scored more goals than El Paso.
The 2 best sides in the West right now.
Yeah, essentially, like on form, 2 of the best sides. And but on the flip side of that, Locomotive have allowed 15 goals, which only Monterey Bay have allowed more. So that is kind of the story so far.
Wow.
Yeah. So despite Locomotive probably being unlucky to be where they're at in terms of results, they have had that obviously leaky defense. So good signs in this one that they weren't as charitable as they have been, and I think we have seen that improvement in defense recently, but obviously not enough to get the results over the line. And that leaves Locomotive again desperate for points with a game against Loudoun United coming up next. And we will take a quick break, and then we will head straight into previewing that Loudoun match.
Sounds good.
The Seriously Loco match preview. Welcome back to Seriously Loco. El Paso travels to Loudoun United this weekend, Mika, and they face a team that there was a bit of sort of tongue-in-cheek hype from certain people early in the season, especially after they had a couple of like highly visible results, and maybe to Locomotive fans, most notably they did beat Indy 11. But after that, Loudoun has kind of fallen off a cliff, and it is, I guess, in summing up Loudoun United, for anyone who hasn't watched them, this is truly a team that their best players actually play for DC United.
Right, and I think their best players actually are DC United, like, contracted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they did look impressive in that first game because they had the likes of, like, Cude Pietro and all that playing against Indy in the freezing cold. Yeah, winless in their last 5 after, that impressive win against Indy. They also shellacked Red Bulls 2 to start the season. Took a draw to Miami on the road, which that's not easy to do.
Yeah.
But after that, they've just absolutely gone off the boil. And there's not really anything that jumps out to me as to why, other than, like you said, the better players being called up for the mother club, if you will. 6 goals scored, 10 conceded. Nothing too interesting there. They're an extremely young squad as it is, an average age of 23, right? So, I mean, just a bunch of children here, and I think they are joining MLS Next Pro or whatever next year, no?
Next year, yeah. So,
I mean, Ryan Martin's remit is not to win things with Loudoun United. It is to develop players for DC United. So I don't know that they care too much about what the results are as long as their players are playing. But that said, they are still, a lot of these guys are still like seasoned professionals and are going to want to win. And it'll be quite a long trip. I don't know that we've ever played Loudoun United. I think this is the first matchup ever, right?
Believe so. Yeah, it is. the first ever matchup. And I mean, really, it's one of Locomotive's first like East Coast trips ever. Like, I don't think they've ever really traveled
Yeah.
to the east.
This is like the
Oklahoma was like as far as we had been.
This is like an Eastern time zone. Like, it'll be a reasonable kickoff time for you.
Yeah. That is true. It is actually a holy crap, it's a 6 p.m. kickoff.
I'm spoiled.
So that means that's a 4 o'clock kickoff for you guys on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. Very awkward. But
We'll have barely,
hey.
I mean, the La Liga games won't even be over by the time this kicks off.
Truly. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Loudoun's story in terms of goals. I mean, as you said, 6 goals, and they really dried up after that initial kind of surge. They've only scored 2 goals in their last 5. They've been kept scoreless in 3 of the last 5, and then just the lone goal against Oakland Roots, who just absolutely pasted them in Oakland, and then Birmingham Legion went to Loudoun last week and got a 2-1 win against a 10-man Loudoun. So I do take, and I've gotten a bit closer to Legion via the USL show because the main host over there, Kaler, is a big Legion fan. And a lot of the results for Legion up until this point had kind of been reminiscent of Locomotive in that they were feeling pretty hard done by. So they are winning tonight so far. So maybe the Loudoun match is the palate cleanser that Locomotive's looking for. This is me trying to talk myself into, a turning point here.
I mean, that would be nice. I don't know. Do you think there's any like physical advantage now that these boys have been, really playing in the altitudes of the Western Conference, going to go over to the Eastern Seaboard and play against some children? I mean, not to be disrespectful, but
yeah.
Do you think there's any like advantage there?
I mean,
the travel is a lot.
Yeah, the travel will be tough. I'm glad we get a full week. In that I'm hopeful we can get out there and get a training session in the conditions, but yeah, it does. I'd say that physically we probably should have a bit of an advantage. I think the only question mark would be what's the humidity like, because I know
right,
having gone back and forth between El Paso and Georgia, there's a big difference to running in El Paso versus running in the humidity.
That's true. That's very true.
So I don't know. It'll be interesting. Although I do think the altitude may help, and yeah, hopefully we look fresh, because I think there's been a lot of these games on the road where and not even just this season, this is more broadly, like where we kind of come out a little flat. So hopeful of a good start, and with the full week, hopefully we've been able to take good advantage of that. As far as Loudoun's squad, Tyler Freeman is the top scorer with 2. It does look like he is, primarily with Loudoun, so I think we could expect to see him. Likewise, Jacob Green, Kamarni Smith, who also have goals this season, and Kamarni Smith, I think, one of the more seasoned pros on this Loudoun side. I think.
Yeah.
I think there's just a good, I say a good spread. They haven't scored that many goals, and the goals are spread across like a decent amount of players. So there's not really one target man or really like one threat that the game particularly flows through. I think they really do rely on a breadth of players to provide goals. And interestingly enough, like, none of the guys with goals are listed as strikers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, on top of the fact that they spread the goals around, they do have, a talented manager in Ryan Martin. He was previously the assistant manager of John Harkes at Cincinnati before they went MLS. And, John Harkes obviously very successful Greenville Triumph. So I wonder kind of how that's going to develop, if he's going to stay on when they go to MLS Next Pro, or if he's going to try and strike out with an independent club, because there could be some potential there.
Yeah.
Kind of like how John Hutchinson really started is with S2 and all that. So that'll be something to watch. But I mean, yeah, it would be really nice to just get a win over a side that I think we are pound for pound better than, and maybe even more so than was the matchup against Oakland Roots. But when it comes to these Eastern Conference sides, it's just hard to scout, really, because it's like we're playing. It's almost like you're playing like a continental fixture. Like, this is not a team you'd ever meet otherwise, So they're essentially in another league. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what goes on there.
DC United play on Saturday against Columbus in Columbus, which the only question mark here, and we haven't really seen two teams recently to be able to gauge like what the rhythm is in terms of MLS teams, dropping loan bombs down to their two teams. But in this case, there is maybe a little bit of a threat in that playing in an away match, traditionally you're going to take less players like into to travel to Columbus and dressing for that match and everything. So there might be a little bit of risk of a lone bomb down, like once they decide on their traveling squad for Columbus, it seems like.
Yeah. I mean, and again, that's why it makes it so hard, not only because they're an Eastern Conference side, but because they do have that really close connection with an MLS side. It's like, how do we even scout, for this one? And maybe that just means we need to focus on ourselves and not be worried too much about what the opposition's going to do, because I think there's a lot that we need to shore up and build on. And I mean, the one thing that I am looking forward to is having Diego Luna back, because I think that he could really go off after some rest, some enforced rest. And I think he's a player for, to play against a weak side. Like, he could really, really do some damage here. But I say weak side, but I also think they could give people a game. I mean, they gave Miami a game. Miami they probably should have won that game, to be honest. Beat Indy 11. And kind of a weird circumstance, opening night, they were on the road, or, they were at home, but Indy were on the road, and just, new manager, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's tough, and you don't want to be you don't want to be the team that helps turn another team's fortunes around, right? Because five winless on the trot, like, let's not be them. Let's not give them hope and restart their season. So we just got to go out there and handle the business, really.
You mentioned Diego Luna returning to the side. We know that Sonupe won't be available, who was, of the starters of the last match, that's like the one player who will be definitely unavailable for this one. Do you think that Diego goes back into midfield and there's a different sort of look in the front line, or do you think Diego moves into the front line and we see Sonupe replaced with someone else, or and we see Calvillo stick around?
I think just based on the fact that Hutch kind of singled out Calvillo for praise and having to wait his turn and bide his time to get minutes, I think we'll probably see Calvillo again in the midfield, if anything, and Diego return to that forward line. Just to give us a little bit of extra oomph in the attack and maybe sit one of the nominal nines, probably Josue. And then Francois, from what we gather, has been training well, and he is that Eastern Conference import, right? So he should know how to approach this game, and that might be a a trick up our sleeve that we can use either, for him to start or coming on against tired, inexperienced legs, if you will. So, yeah, I expect Diego back in the forward line. I don't know if you agree or what.
Yeah, I think for the exact reasons that you said, like the coach he's not gonna like single out players for fun. And the fact that he specifically mentioned Calvillo, he specifically mentioned Cristiano Francois in training to Joe Rodriguez. So like, yeah, all of that does point to, I think we see Francois from the start. I think we see Calvillo in there. I do think the question mark about Calvillo is like, do we continue to see him in this 8 role? Because obviously it will be quite a different decision if Richie Ryan gets a rest and then Calvillo's in there, and then maybe we see Chopper return to the 8, and which I'm not necessarily advocating for, but just something like thinking through managing Richie's minutes and making sure that he's still feeling good. And then, in the front line, we've seen Francois most often on the left with Sonupe the other side. If Diego's back, maybe there's a shout for Francois playing in like more of like an inverted role and trying to run infield with Lucho maybe dropping a little bit deeper into that sort of false 9 role that we've seen in the past, that playmaking sort of role. So yeah, it could be something, and maybe giving Cristiano a little bit of just a different angle of attack, I guess, like, because it obviously hasn't really worked out for him on the left yet this season. So maybe just one of those things where almost like mid-match you'll sometimes see like a manager just have the wingers or the fullbacks like switch sides, and after a while it's like, just like give it a shot, because it's not working so far. So maybe that just even that slight change for Cristiano, maybe they target something like that.
Yeah, no, those are all good shouts. And another thing too that I hope will change is that, assuming Lucho starts, I really hope that he gets more touches, because he made the most of what he did get, scoring the goal, and nearly having a second, but he was the player with the least touches to play 90 minutes with just 27, and I think that's a waste of Lucho Solignac. I mean, he's got to get on the ball a little bit more, and we know that he can start to get frustrated and maybe drift in and out of the game if that starts to happen, and he feels like he's not getting on the ball, and then he'll start to leave his position to try and get on the ball. So I think it's really imperative on his teammates that they try to include him more, because that can only be a good thing for us.
Right. Well, so with all that being said, team selections and all these things up in the air, obviously, midweek, and we'll see as things get closer if the decisions get fleshed out at all. But ahead of this one, we have the unenviable task of trying to predict what's going to happen on Saturday. So what do you think Locomotive produce in this one, result and the goal scorer, or a goal scorer, I should say?
Goal scorer, I'll pick Diego Luna to come back and mark his return with a goal.
Good shout.
Yeah, and result, I'll go 2-1 Locomotive. I'm not betting against the boys. Like, it's just not going to happen. So against my better judgment.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a tough one. I think 2-1's probably smart money. If you're picking a win, I'll go, I don't know. It's worked. I guess it worked in the past where I kind of like went outrageous for the Monterey Bay game and we got a reward. So, They've been goal shy. Otherwise, I would pick maybe a little bit of a goal fest on the road, but they haven't really scored that much, so I'm not sure. And our defense has been better. Am I about to? This is stupid, probably, but whatever. I manifested chaos by saying, "Oh, this game's going to be this game." Madrid are not going to want this game to be open against City, and then it ended 4-3. So I'll just say, whatever. Locomotive don't keep clean sheets, so let me manifest a 1-0 for Locomotive.
Wow.
And I'll say, I think, you know what? Coach says he's training well. He's back in the East, like you said. I'll pick Cristiano to get off the mark for us.
I like that. That was going to be my other shout. Yeah.
And hopefully I can manifest some him turning a corner in terms of his level and a clean sheet for the boys on the road, because I think that would be big. So whether it'll happen or not, we'll see. But hopefully this is manifesting that. I don't know.
Love it.
Well,
love it.
Well, yeah, it's gonna be a tight one. As we said, we'll likely have a watch party for that one. It will be a lot easier for your boy for sure, with the 6 p.m. Eastern time kickoff. So with all that being said, you can check us out on Twitch, Facebook, or on Twitter for those, and it is really cool with Twitch and Facebook that you can interact live, chat, and just really stay, either celebrate right along with us, which we haven't been able to do on the stream very often yet, or you can commiserate, and it turns into a nice little group therapy sesh, so we can help each other through it. But yeah, so that'll be this Saturday as Locomotive take on Loudoun, and then you can find the podcast in basically anywhere you listen to podcasts. Hopefully, you found your platform of choice and hit that subscribe button and tune in for all the good Loco chat, and then you can find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. In terms of like social networks. So check us out on any of those, and let's hopefully be back to talk about a win against Loudoun next week when we are back. But until then, stay loco.
Peace.